Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, oh my gosh, this is a fun show. We've got the great Walter Sabo on as our guest. He's an expert at talk radio. He's been doing it since the mid-'70s, early 70s. And Chris Tobin is with us as well. We're talking about technology, radio, ownership, making sure we keep the audience, all that stuff next on TWiRT. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support online at bgs.cc. By the Ruby console from Lavo. See Lavo in your future at lavo.com/TWiRT. And by Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. And I know I say it every week, more and more, all the digital stuff in between and the stuff that never makes it to the top of the tower because it's going out over the interwebs, like you're probably watching or listening to this show right now. All right, Chris Tobin is going to be a little bit late today. He's stuck on a train or under a tower or something like that. He's wrapping up and says he'll be along shortly. But that's okay, because we have an amazing guest who's going to be given lots of time to spill the beans and share his mind on a number of topics. And once in a while, we bring in somebody that is a little bit less than, the deep in the weeds technical kind of thing. And that is our show today, because today we're very pleased to have Walter Sabo with us. Walter, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. Glad you're here.
I have been forced to learn about radio tech ever since I started doing a Westwood One network radio show from my laundry room. And now I have become an expert on remote digital broadcasts.
Oh my gosh. So before the Westwood One show, did you operate remotely or were you always in studio?
I wasn't a host. No, I take it back. I was a host for 5 years for WPHT, the CBS Now Intercom station in Philadelphia. I also did that from my laundry room.
Oh my gosh. Now we'll tell you what, we'll find out about why the laundry. I got to hear about why the laundry room. That's going to be an interesting story. Maybe it's the special acoustics of the laundry room. Maybe it's because maybe you have some dirty socks that need to be washed and there's just no other time to do it. Hey, our show This Week in Radio Tech is coming to you live right now anyway, from the Telos Alliance studio. That's my studio here in Nashville, Tennessee. And Walter, well, he's at the other end of a Skype call somewhere. I'm not sure where he is. And of course, Chris Tobin, we never know where he is. Just he's somewhere in the New York area, unless he's he's in Toronto or somewhere. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Angry Audio. Angry Audio, Mike Dosh, and his amazing set of gadgets and gizmos. Let's take a look now at what they've got to offer. Oh, it's this cool thing. If you've got one of these little live audio mixers, you see them everywhere, like made by Behringer, Mackie, other companies too. Some are so good that you may be tempted to use one in a radio studio. Now, sadly, they are missing some necessary features that, until now, have only been available on expensive radio consoles. Well, enter the Talk Show Gadget. The Talk Show Gadget adds essential broadcast features to your live mixer, like a studio monitor volume control and a second input for listening to the air feed. Your monitor speakers will mute automatically to prevent feedback only when any mic is live. And speaking of live mics, the Talk Show Gadget even provides logic to illuminate an on-air sign, hopefully hushing up the hallway chatterbox. LED illuminated push buttons instantly activate up to 4 microphones. You can mix it just right and then leave the faders in place. From the powder-coated steel enclosure to the internal linear power supply, the Talk Show Gadget is built rugged for the realities of radio. You can check it out for yourself at angryaudio.com. Angryaudio.com. And thanks so much, Angry Audio, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. By the way, we've got another new sponsor coming on, I think, for the first year. So glad to have people realizing that we've got literally thousands of engineers and people who love radio listening to and watching this show. And by the way, if it's been a while since I've thanked you for watching, thanks a lot for watching. We appreciate you. Okay, Kirk Harnack along with Walter Sabo here. And so, Walter, you've done all kinds of things in radio. I guess most of them on this side of the microphone where you are now, correct?
Well, mostly I'm very impressed with your voice. You have a very big voice. You're like a broadcaster voice, whereas I don't have a broadcaster voice. How did you get that voice?
Well, that would be a good topic for another show, but It's kind of because up until the age of 13, I stuttered profoundly. I literally could not say my name until I was about 13 years old. And of course, I wanted to get in radio because I couldn't do that. And about the time girls quit having cooties, I figured out maybe how to quit stuttering. And I found out if I was me and a microphone in a room by myself, I didn't stutter so much.
It's surprising how many broadcasters I know were born with severe stuttering problems. And part of the ways I had lunch yesterday with Chris Abrams, who you may know works at Futuri. He's one of those real programmers who traveled a lot throughout his life to go to programming jobs, which I wouldn't do. But he had severe stuttering. John Stossel, the television star, severe stutterer off the air. It's an interesting way to solve the problem.
Wow, had no idea. That'd be a cool thing to have a little NAB get together of people who stuttered before getting on air.
It would be a long conversation.
Like Mel Tillis, it's why he never speaks on his records, because the record would be this big. That's what he would say. Well, you've done and what now? Behind, on the other side of the microphone, you've done a lot of consulting, and I'd love to hear about that. But let's hear about this laundry. Are you in the laundry room now?
Yes, I'm in the laundry room now. I broadcast the show, my Westwood One Network radio show, which is on this is for radio geeks, 650 clears. I'm on 650 clears. I'm on WMAL FM. We're on 80 stations plus Guam, all of them live. We're live on every station. It's live clearance, including Guam, which means 3 p.m. on Mondays. We're live in Guam. That excites me more than KMOX. And the fact is that we broadcast from the laundry room for the same reason all men are in the laundry room. My wife said, that's where you're doing the show. You're doing the show from the laundry room. I said, what about this nice living room? No, you're doing it from the laundry room. There's the thing I don't understand, completely mystified about women demanding equal rights, is I have never been in a situation at home or at work where women were not in charge. I grew up in North Jersey. In every home in North Jersey, it's a matriarchy. The women of North Jersey run every household. And here's what happens. Let's say there's trouble in a Jersey household. Let's say there's trouble with the kids or some other kind of problem. Every Jersey mom knows somebody. They either know the Monsignor, the head rabbi, a guy who can get you tickets, somebody who can get you a few bucks at the last minute, or most importantly, the produce manager at ShopRite. They all know somebody. And therefore, when there's trouble in a North Jersey household, it goes like this. They point to their husbands and say, sit over there and read the paper and be quiet. And then they get on the phone and they talk to their posse. Now, who said what? How did that happen? Who are we going to call and fix this? And the women gather together and they fix the problem. Anytime I've ever been in my first boss was a woman. My second boss was a woman. My third boss was a woman. And I've never been in a meeting where when there are women present, which is always, the men don't defer to their opinion. I don't know what the heck they're talking about where they say want equal rights. You want to have equal rights with a 40-year-old man? You know what 40-year-old men do? They spend their entire day mapping in their heads where the nearest bathroom is. You want that? Good luck.
Oh, no. Here's what I do want. Chris Tobin, I think, is here now. And so, Walter, meet my friend Chris Tobin. Chris, Walter Sabo. Hey.
I hope you guys can hear me. I'm trying something real fast, ad hoc. I'm in our studio. So we'll give it a whirl.
Are you in Temple or buying a Christmas tree? I'm a little confused about where you are exactly.
I'm both. No, I'm in a performance space here at the radio station. We just wrapped up one of our Facebook Live events with Cyrus Chestnut. Let me get that straight. So yeah, I just quickly ran in front of the Steinway. You can see it. And yeah, it's the holiday season. So it's Christmas tree, menorah, and the Kwanzaa candles. So we're covered.
Where is this studio?
Newark, New Jersey.
Where?
Newark, in downtown Newark, across from Military Park. WBGO.
Cheap rent.
At the moment, it is.
I grew up in Maplewood.
Neighborhood's improving.
I grew up in Maplewood, so I know Newark well. That's why I asked where you were.
Yeah, it's just north of us, not too far. We've had a few folks come through.
Chris, I'm supposing you heard the story about the northern New Jersey housewives and how they get
Yes,
her
I
done.
did. Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's and any time I tell that story, I get dozens of emails or phone calls from people who grew up in New Jersey, and they go, "You're right. You're absolutely right. I thought it was just my house." No, it's every house in New Jersey. The mother's in charge. They're all Carmela Soprano. Notice that when he got home, he had no power. When Tony Soprano was at home, he was bossed around by his wife and his daughter. He had no power. That's true of all New Jersey households.
Wow. Gee. So Chris, Walter was telling
the question, why am I in the laundry room doing a network radio show that's on 650,000 watt clear channel stations plus 80 other stations? It's because my wife said, "You're going to do the show from the laundry room." Now, let me take it further. At first, because I'm a proud broadcaster, I didn't admit that I was in the laundry room. I wanted them to imagine I was at WPHT or imagine I was at KMOX or WLS. All of those stations clear our show live 100% every week. But then at one point I said, why don't I just admit I'm in the laundry room? And then after a couple months of admitting I was in the laundry room and listeners writing to me and calling with advice on how to do laundry using brand names, I said, well, why don't I just take in laundry? And therefore, the last few weeks during the show, we have done listener laundry, actual listener laundry. And I'm incredibly impressed that a WBAP listener, a retired Air Force sergeant, Elizabeth Thomason, a retired Air Force sergeant, actually sent in her fatigues for us to watch during the show, which we did last week.
Oh, gosh. That sounds like a lot of fun and something that we won't be doing here on TWiRT. Oh, man.
If you want engagement, do their laundry.
Now, I must say, Walter, you don't sound like you're in a laundry room. So what's your setup?
It's much worse than yours. I have this mic.
Mm-hmm. Good mic.
I had an Air One board. You know what that is?
Yeah.
You guys make it, right?
No, that's a competitor.
Well, who makes that?
It's Air One's from Wheatstone, I think.
Yeah. So I had an Air One board, and then my 6-year-old poured water in it.
Oh, no.
And that was the end of the Air One board.
Yeah.
Now I'm back to an Allen and Heath XB10. I use an Allen and Heath XB10, which has too many knobs on it and looks like, a board you'd use at a bad high school prom. And then I have these earphones because these are the only ones that are comfortable. I had the expensive, the ones that all the guys really like, that other kind, but I use these Sonys. I like the Sonys because they don't hurt my head. The other ones hurt my head. What's the kind with the gold band at the top? What's that one?
Oh, maybe some AKGs?
Yeah, I had the AKGs, but they were insanely uncomfortable.
Yeah, those Sonys are they're sweet on your ears. They really are. 7506 probably is what you're wearing.
But here's the key. The way the network works, the way it works is I connect from the laundry room to WPHT in Philadelphia, the Entercom CBS station in Philadelphia. My board is run there. Mm-hmm. And they hit the network queues. They connect from WPHT to Westwood One on Long Island. That's how the connection goes. But the key is I go from the laundry room to WPHT via a tiny app called QGoLive, the letter QGoLive, which makes me sound as though I'm in the studio. And it's an IT connection. That's how we connect. I play all the sound. So there's a lot of audio that we play, and I play all that. What they do in Philadelphia is they play the long pieces, the long features, and they hit the spots.
Do you run QGoLive on your Mac?
I run QGoLive. I use 2 computers. One just has QGoLive, and I do it on a Mac. But I've also done it on a PC, but I hate PCs. I hate them with a passion you can't begin to imagine. Because I'm left-handed and an English major. I don't know why I need to learn function keys. Why do I have to learn function keys? Why am I supposed to learn a whole new skill? That's why I've had a Mac since the 512. I've always had a Mac. And then I use Soundboard to run all the sound effects, and that I use on a different computer. So the only thing I run QGoLive, on one computer, I just run QGoLive.
And I take it that's what the mixer does. It mixes your soundboard program from the other computer with your mic, and then sends it to the QGoLive computer.
That goes USBs into the QGoLive computer.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds like a good way to do it.
Well, it's okay. I had an ISDN, and then when it got up to $900 a month, we got rid of the ISDN.
Yeah, yeah. The phone companies don't want to be in that business anymore.
They hate it. I'm in Shaker Heights, Ohio. I cannot get a copper wire landline in my home. I can't get it. They don't exist. They won't sell you one.
We've been converting people over to voice over IP now for a long time, and Steve Church, the guy who invented the Telos Zephyr so many years ago, and and the phone system. You said you got one of the very first Telos phone systems, right?
Yes, I consulted the RKO radio stations for 9 years, and before that, I was the executive vice president in charge of the NBC-owned radio stations, and I bought Telos systems of both of them first year.
Gotcha.
And the reason I bought the reason I bought the system first year is that the buttons looked really cool. I liked the way you touched the buttons. It looked nice. I'd punch them. It felt good. That's what I knew, and that's why we got them.
Well, they got to be right for on-air people who don't have a lot of time to look at and feel for a button. They got to look and punch, or even not look and punch,
and sober up.
Yeah. Well, we've got some topics or questions. I don't know if we're going to get to them all, or if there's anything else you want to talk about. But you've been doing talk radio for a while. Weren't you in the 70s doing consulting and talking? When did you get started?
My first job out of New York. My first job out of college was I did a call-in talk show on 99X, which was WOR FM, in 1973. That was my first job out of college, and so I was 20 when I did that. That was my first job. And then my second job out of college is I did the same show at WNBC FM, which at the time was an all-news station. And then when I was made head of the NBC FM O&Os, I was responsible for the NBC FM owned stations, WYNY in New York, KQX in Chicago, KYUU San Francisco, and KISS in Washington. I put talk shows on all of those stations on FM in the 70s. And I was the guy who found Dr. Ruth Westheimer giving a lecture at City College, and I said, "Do you want to be on the radio?" I hired Dr. Ruth Westheimer to do 15 minutes on Sunday nights on WYNY, 15 minutes for After Scale, which was $20. We hired Dr. Ruth Westheimer for $20. After 6 months, she was #1 adults 18 to 34 in New York City. We converted it to 2 hours live, and she took phone calls, and she was the #1 adult 18 to 34 show in New York City. And then, after a year, after she had been a professor at City College, after a year of doing a talk show on WYNY in New York, she was on the cover of People. She was represented by William Morris and Walter Ivana Seville. And the gave her whatever she wanted. I begged her to do the show every night, and she wouldn't do it. And the reason she wouldn't do it is because to this day, she is listed in the Manhattan telephone directory as a psychologist, and you can call her office and make an appointment to see Dr. Ruth. She would never give up her private practice.
Chris, do you remember hearing Dr. Ruth that long ago or about then?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. WYNY, WNYS, it was WNWY, WS, yep. Oh, yeah, back in the day. And it was, YNY was very, very popular station.
Now, as tech guys, you'll appreciate what I walked into at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. I'll tell you this quickly, but only because you're tech guys. When I walked into 30 Rockefeller Plaza, the building where the lab housed Armstrong's lab that invented FM, when I walked into 30 Rock in 1978, this is what I found at their FM. They were using a refurbished automation system from Schaefer that never worked. The transmitter was literally older than I was. The vertical signal was at 50% strength of the horizontal signal. Therefore, no matter where you went, there was picket fencing. It modulated at 80% negative peaks because the engineers didn't want to use too much electricity. And they had one control board, and the production was done on the audition channel during songs. That's what I walked into, and that was the best of 4 facilities. In San Francisco, KYUU's transmitter was in would go off whenever it rained because the roof leaked and shorted it out. That was NBC. People figure, well, it must have been an easy job. You walk in, you just run the stations. No. I had to build them from scratch and hire 200 people from scratch and create 4 formats from scratch. And the corporate culture of NBC, and again, I'm only telling you this for text. Sarnoff and Armstrong had a feud, and their feud took place in 1948. And Armstrong wanted money to develop FM. Sarnoff said, no, I'm using every dime I've got to develop color television. As a result, he yanked all the funding for FM radio. And from the minute they had that fight to the minute Fred Silverman hired me, NBC only spent the money necessary to keep those signals on the air and not 1 penny more. The culture was that those stations were not actually radio. You got off the elevator, it said WMAQ radio, WKQX FM, WNBC radio, WYNY FM. To them, FM wasn't actually radio.
Wow. So my question was going to be, how is talk radio different today than it was in the 70s? And I think you've given us a pretty interesting glimpse of that already. But what else do you say to that question?
How's it different? I'll give you an answer to your question. The answer to the question is that talk radio started in 1957. It started when a WOR engineer invented the 7-second delay. And that was when listeners could go on the air. It started in 1957. It started at WOR, KABC, KGO, WGN, WBZ. Though there were only, until 1980, there were only 49 full-time talk stations in America. And what they all talked about was their day. People called in and talked about their day. The host talked about their day, what they did with their kids, what they watched on television, an extraordinary news event. They talk about their point of view. They gave strong opinions about their day. There was no political theory. And the reason there was no political theory was because of the fairness doctrine. And because of the fairness doctrine, if somebody mentioned a candidate or a public figure, they had to give equal time. And that was a big pain in the butt.
Yeah.
As a result, all those stations were dominant number 1 stations. The minute they started talking about political theory, they all started to go down and got old. And they still go down, and they keep getting older, and nobody seems to notice. Meanwhile, the audience of people talking about their day have gone to Ellen and Jerry Springer and Wendy Williams and Judge Judy. Those are people talking about their day.
Wow. You're blowing my mind with all this info and these insights. Who's doing talk radio right now, if anybody?
Mike Trivisano. Mike Trivisano is the best local talk show host in America. He's on WTAM and Afternoon Drive. He's been on since 1997. You know what? He talks about his day.
Perishable content.
He doesn't talk about political theory.
Yeah.
I don't know when it became interesting to scream at Democrats. Seems like a short conversation, and there are only 2 possible answers. I don't know how that became a format, but I never had anything to do with it. I put on a lot of talk stations like New Jersey 101.5 and Real Radio in Orlando. Those are some of the stations that I started and named. And at no time did we sit around saying, where can we find conservatives to scream? We sat around and said, who can we find who will follow our format?
How important to you are listener callers?
Insanely important because of a study that I saw. Remember when radio stations used to invest money in research? One of my favorite was the dial research, where a group of listeners would turn up the dial if they liked something, turn down the dial if they didn't like something. and it graphed. You could see in real time how people reacted to real time things. Well, what was fascinating was that I saw a number of these pieces of research done with talk station air checks. And every time the host went to a call, those meters spiked. Every time. The minute he went to a call or she went to a call, everybody turned their meter all the way up. And as the call went on, they would turn it slowly down till at about 90 seconds, nobody wanted to hear that call anymore. The reason talk stations suffer from the myth that talk is a high TSL, low cum format is because they don't take calls. The shows that take calls have high cums. The stations that are caller focused have high cums. New Jersey 101.5, sitting there in Ewing Township, New Jersey. Ewing Township, New Jersey. Its signal is 50 miles south of WABC. Its signal is 50 miles north of WPHT. And you know what? It beats them both in the demo in their metros. It beats the talk stations in New York City, in the New York City metro, and in Philly in the metro. And what do? They take about 60 calls an hour. It's wall-to-wall calls. No monologues, and now we're going to pay some bills, and I'm going to tell you this endless story that only people who can't move we're going to listen to. Now we're going to pay some bills. If I had a host at a station I consulted say, well, now we're going to pay some bills, they'd be gone. Because it's the same physics as a CHR. If you wouldn't do it on Z100, why the heck would you say it on a talk station?
So I heard you, Walter, on a podcast. Actually, I was listening this afternoon. I think you're on with Dick Taylor. And you posited that one of the things that drives listeners is events. And I'm going to want to hear from what Chris Tobin has to say, because I suspect he'll agree, because his station does a lot of events as well. But what do you mean by events and covering events, and why does that draw an audience?
I believe in covering events. I believe in going where the crowd is. And an event is where a crowd is. And you want to be in the center of where your target listener is going and doing and spending money. If they've taken the time to go someplace, spend the money someplace, you want to be there. You want to be visible. And once we're there, we have the power to do something that no other medium can do. We can take anybody in that crowd and make them a star by putting them on the air. When you and I put somebody on the air, we have created a life event. That is something they will remember till they die. You sit in focus groups and you say to a group of people, did you ever enter a radio station contest? They'll say no. But if you say, most people have entered a radio station contest, which one did you enter? All their hands will go up. And here's the thing. Every one of them can tell you when it was, who the disc jockey was, what the radio station looked like when they went to get their prize, and unless it was disposable, they all still had the prize. Why did they still have the prize? It was a life event. It was as close to show business as most of them will ever come. Let's do more of that. Let's give them those events.
Chris, I'll bet you're in total agreement, but let's hear your perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. Walter's absolutely correct. The one thing that we always overlook, and I think it's sad, because I worked for a programmer many years ago at an AM station, an AM/FM combo, and he did everything that was outside the book. He threw the book out the window. The VP of programming for the company would just call us up and go, "Are you guys doing it again?" And he'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Just looked at the ratings. We only did 2 books a year at the time when the diaries were around, spring and fall. And he's like, "Okay, you guys are doing it again. You beat out the 50 kilowatt AM and the FMs in town." That's because we did things, as Walter pointed out. We engaged the audience. When we went out and did an event, we literally brought people in. We had tchotchkes to give out. We made it. I used to call it, it's like, what's in it for me? I'm going to come out and see you do a broadcast, you call it, and what's in it for me to come out here? And that's what we gave them. One example, the program director came up with this idea of, when he came on board, the station had a 0.1 share. Okay, basically, we all know that's basically useless. So he said, okay, when we make it to 1 share in the market, we're going to have a celebration. So next book came out, and sure enough, we got to 1 share. And he decided to do Thank You Thursday. Now, why'd you do Thursday? Thursdays, well, that's because it's diary day. So let's do Thursday. We did at 12 noon. We did Thank You Thursday. Come downtown, and we're going to give out free hot dogs from the hot dog stand. Now, most people thought, it's goofy. Well, maybe a handful of folks come by. Well, by 12:20, we had 210 people surrounding this push cart, and we had to ask the guy, where do you buy your hot dogs, and how many more can we get? And by 1:30, the police department was there already cordoning off the area and trying to control the crowd. This was for Thank You Thursday. This had nothing to do with anything. We didn't give out money. There was no cash registers, no secret sounds, no nothing. It was just thank you for making us one share in the market. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. And here's a hot dog, and take it away. And that was the start of many crazy things we did. Today, if you told that idea to someone and pitched it, they'd probably look at you like you're nuts and say, no, we can't do that. And we did other things. We did a lot of things that people today would say, you're crazy. So I think Walter's absolutely right. We need to get back to the basics of just engaging people on a very useful platform. I mean, I call it perishable content. If your content's perishable, people want it because it's there at one moment. It's gone. That's its value.
Medium,
and that's, yeah.
I'm sorry, as a medium, we're very good at that stuff. Newspapers, TV stations, they're lame at that stuff. They're terrible at it. Nothing's sadder than a TV station or a newspaper trying to run a contest. But we have contests in our bones. We know how to run contests, no problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And contesting can be done very properly, can be done very well if you think about it. Just walk a mile in the shoes of those you're trying to pitch, and then you'll understand which way to go. And it works. And the nice thing about radio, and we sell this all the time. I mean, I was taught this in sales classes, and what do you call these seminars? It's about reach and frequency. It's about, reminding people who you are. It's what you're doing, and you go out there and you do this thing. And we don't practice that. We don't practice what we preach. And we're wondering why we're in debt up to our eyeballs, or we can't get ratings, or can't make things happen. It's just fascinating. I watched the industry shift around. It's just, I've seen things done that made sense, that worked. And the stations I worked for, we made money. Granted, if you went by today's standards, they'd look at you and say, no, sorry, that doesn't follow programming acumen. You got it all wrong. I don't know. I'm just saying, I've seen it work. And, it takes you back to the days of Boss Jocks and, KHJ and WCAU in the 80s with Mike Joseph and his programming ideas, and people thought he was nuts. Seemed to work for him. And there was Rick Sklar, same thing.
Yeah, but you have to remember that we're in an industry that thinks it's innovative to play Christmas music at Christmas time.
No. I mean, it's great. You have to play Christmas music in October just after Halloween.
Same time Walmart brings the stuff out.
Crazy stuff.
So you can front load that PPM, paperwork.
Crazy.
Hey, guys, if our listeners, if you're with us, you are watching This Week in Radio Tech, episode 423, with Walter Sabo, our guest. It's Kirk Harnack, and Chris Tobin is along as well. And coming up, we're going to be asking Walter about what we as engineers can do to help talent do a better job, make it more convenient for them, so they can focus on what they're saying, on that content. And we're going to ask Walter if there's anything that engineering can do to make stations better. How much focus on audio processing or quality or signal, the things that we maybe can do something about. We know that content is king, and I think Walter would absolutely tell you that. But let's see if there's anything that we as engineers can do to help out. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by our friends at Lavo. We'll continue in just a sec.
There has probably never been a better time in history to buy a new radio mixing console. Today's consoles are more sophisticated than ever, with more features and functions than you can shake a stick at. But have you noticed how complicated they are? There's a sea of knobs and switches and displays and buttons. Some of them look like you might need a pilot's license to do your show. Well, a board doesn't have to be complicated to be powerful. Just look at the new Ruby mixing surface from Lavo. The first thing you notice is how smooth and streamlined it is. Ruby has lots of cool tech, but what it doesn't have is that confusing ocean of buttons that clutter things up. Now, we all know that there are some console features the jock only uses once in a while, so why dedicate controls to them? Ruby fixes this problem by moving those once-in-a-blue-moon controls to a touch-sensitive, customizable GUI that happily shares screen space with your other studio software, helping you fight control room clutter. Thanks to this design innovation, talent that use Ruby produce smoother shows with less errors. Controls that are used the most fall naturally to hand, while functions that rarely need adjustment are easily controlled with just a couple of clicks in the context-sensitive GUI. And Ruby has cool features you won't find on other boards, like Auto Mix, an intelligent gain writing function that guarantees the perfect mix for multi-mic morning shows and call-in segments. Dual mode snapshots that instantly switch the motorized faders between on-air and production modes. and enough DSP and I/O options to make even your pro sound pals green with envy. And because quality is as important to Lavo as it is to you, every console is proudly built to fanatically precise standards at Lavo's own factory in Germany. If you're ready to declutter your control room, do yourself a favor. Check out the new Ruby and the other cool Lavo radio tech at www.lawo.com/TWiRT.
Thanks a lot to Lavo for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. We really appreciate it. And go to lavo.com/TWiRT. Take you right to the radio stuff, and it'll let you know that you heard about it here and we sent you. All right, it's Kirk, Harnack, Chris Tobin. We're talking with the legendary radio consultant and on-air talent, Walter Sabo. He's got great ideas about getting listeners and maintaining them and making radio, worth listening to, that content. And Walter, let's talk a bit about how an engineer can be helpful to you. Maybe in your career, you've run across some really helpful engineers and some that were not so helpful. Give me your thoughts on your relationship with engineers.
There's nothing more important than a good engineer and a good production director. It was very interesting. RKO General, which is a company I consulted for 8 years, they owned WOR, KHJ, KEarth, KFRC, all the big scary stations that sounded like they were coming from Thunder Mountains. They had the best chiefs as a group. They had the best chiefs I ever knew. The reason they had the best chiefs and the best production directors and the best morning men was because of the chairman of the board of RKO General. The chairman of the board of RKO General is the man who hired John Gambling and Gene Shepard and the McCanns and Dr. Don Rose and Don Steele and Robert W. Morgan and Bill Drake and later on me. He hired all those people. It makes me sad that Tom O'Neill has not gotten bigger credit in the history of radio, because everything that we all admire was because of him. But here's why they had the best chief engineers and the best production directors and the best morning men. He had, when he hired me to consult the chain, he had one directive. He said, listen to me, you spend whatever you have to spend for a morning man. Never tell me somebody else has a better morning man because we couldn't afford him. You spend whatever you have to spend. Spend whatever you have to spend to make sure we have the best production director. And spend whatever you have to spend to make sure my signals, he said, my signals are the loudest in that city. And if we have to build the equipment, if we have to create the equipment, make sure it gets done. And that's where Eric Small came from. Eric Small came from an RKO General radio station with unlimited funding from RKO General. And then he looked at me, he said, anything else you want, you're going to have to beg for. But the check was open for those three things. Right now I get to work with Dave Scalish, who's the chief for the Intercom cluster in Philadelphia, and he's a magic man. They're fantastic. Here's what you could do. I have said this my whole life. No one's done it yet. The reason people are on the air is because they want to be alone in a studio and eat and smoke. That's why they're on the air. They don't know how to socialize. I've never known anybody who's on the air who's good at small talk, a disc jockey or a talk show host. Talk shows are the worst. Talk show hosts are the worst off the air. I want a control board that I can pour coffee into and nothing happens. Now imagine if you run an ad and there's a control board and coffee is being poured into it, and the headline is, no problem. You will make hundreds of millions of dollars because hundreds of them will be ordered that day. Seems to me that if there are airtight cameras and watches and submarines, should be able to figure this one out.
That is a good point. I like that. I will pass that along to the people that I talk to at Telos. Okay, so thanks for the great words on engineers, and but I want to ask you about something else that's been popping up in the news. And actually, I'm friends with an NAB board member, and he kind of let me in on this just before it hit the news, and that is the NAB's proposal to the FCC about ownership limits. I guess you've read about this, right?
Yes.
What do you think?
I don't think people are very confused about something, which is this. Ownership limits, consolidation was not the problem. Consolidating our industry was not the problem. People have great romance about radio pre-consolidation, but let me remind you that over half the radio stations in America lost money before consolidation. Half of them. It was not a wonderful fantasy land of broadcasting. But consolidation's not the problem. They could eliminate all ownership caps, no problem, could care less. Here's the problem. The financial law. It used to be that in order to get a radio station license, you had to be able to have money in the bank to operate that station for the tenure of the license. You had to be able to show that you had enough money in the bank to run that station until the end of the license. You had to demonstrate financial stability, financial capability. You could not deficit finance radio stations. They could not be financed by venture capitalists. When that law went away, that's when the trouble started. That's when we became a financial commodity. That's when companies were able to buy and sell radio stations like they bought and sold anything else. They eliminated how long you had to hold the license. You remember you had to hold them for 3 years and then you had to hold them for 7. You couldn't sell it until you owned it for 3 years. And then you couldn't sell it until you owned it for 7 years. Well, no venture capitalist wants anything to do with any kind of company that they can't sell whenever they want. The minute that rule was rescinded, that's when venture capital came in. That's when Clear Channel got its debt load. That's when Cumulus got its debt load. That's when Citadel got its debt load. Then they could be deficit financed. Ta-da! There's the result.
Wow, that's a take I'd never heard before. The first part of what you said,
that's true.
I totally agree that changing the state, people owning more stations was not the downfall of radio. We look at the past with such rose-colored glasses, and I remember, nice days in radio pre-consolidation. But I also knew that the stations I was working for, engineering for, were losing money and could not stay afloat forever in that condition.
No, it was when they rescinded the law that required you to have X amount of dollars in the bank in order to get a license. You had to show your bank account. You had to show that you had the money to run those stations for 3 to 9 years in a positive way, or you weren't going to get a license. The minute that went away, venture capital could come in, Wall Street could come in, and debt arrived.
But Walter, then only rich people can own radio stations.
It wasn't. That's true. Rich people mostly did own radio stations, and giant corporations did own radio stations. Remember, in the old days, they were owned by ABC, RCA, General Electric, General Tire, Nationwide Insurance. Those were some of the companies that owned the big radio stations. So yes, it took a big big company to own the radio station, but now it takes a big company to carry the debt.
Chris, I'm sorry. Were you going to pop in and say something?
No, Walter's absolutely right. I worked for when the 2 broadcast companies that when the law went away, we were pretty much sold off in, I think, 6 months' time. And I watched it. I worked for a company where the father ran the business for, 20 years, maybe so. Gave it to the son. And within 9 months, we reduced the reduction in force, I believe is the term, the staffing, so that the budget could look better, because according to him in his presentation to the staff, when he changed everything, it made us more profitable. And I was like, well, yeah, if you cut the staff, that's cutting expenses, but it's not making you more profitable, so to speak. And it was interesting watching that develop. And then years later, I'd worked for another company where the family kids would take over, and exactly the same thing happened. And we went from number 1 in the market to number 27 to a $5 million, $6 million, $10 million a year revenue to $1 million. And then the excuses were the industry is just falling apart. I'm like, well, we were doing fine until you took over. So I'm curious.
Well, that's a very good point. It's a really good point. Radio listenership has not changed in our lifetime. It has not declined. It's the same as it's always been. Americans love the radio. And as an industry, we have decided that we don't love the radio and stopped knowing how to sell it. It's not because of declining audiences. Newspapers suffer from declining readership dramatically. We haven't had any loss in audience. We've just had a loss in revenue.
It's true, and the audience is still there because speaking of, we talked about earlier live events, and the engineering side of a live event is the technology and how you do it, and how often can you do it reliably and repeatedly and make money from it. I've been to several events. I've worked for different formats, from top 40 to talk to news and music as well. And it's like, hey, the audience is there. We're packing the house. Things are happening. But yet you talk to sales, you talk to program, you talk to the CEO, and like, no, you don't understand. The industry's down. Sales this month, sales in the marketplace is down, is off by 4%, and this is that, and this is what we're going to expect. I'm like, really? Because there's a lot of people out there participating in what we're doing, but we're not capitalizing on it, or I like to say, leveraging it. And that's what I see happening. To your point with talk shows and talking about politics, politics is an empty hole. We all know that. We can do that at the dinner table, and the results. It's a 2-minute conversation, somebody throwing potatoes, and you're done. But if you're talking about your day and how it went, people can relate to that, and that's what it's about. Being on location it adds more value to it. And
I am no genius. I just pay attention to what works. And I remember I paid very close attention when I was growing up. The number one radio station in America was WOR in billing and audience. What did WOR talk about? All those hosts talked about their day. I'll never forget, I'm listening to the Fitzgeralds one day at noon on the number one station in America. Pegeen is broadcasting from her porch in Connecticut. The doorbell rings. She says on the 50,000 watt station, I put a sign up there telling them not to ring the bell at this time. I don't know why. Excuse me, I'm going to have to answer the door. She gets up and answers the door. We have 50 seconds of dead air, which was dramatic and wonderful because it was a mirror to my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was growing up as a kid, it was Rambling with Gambling. I grew up in the New York Metro, and Rambling with Gambling, when I did the history and learned about the history of the gambling family and found out the guy who started this whole thing was filling in for the guy who was sick, was the chief engineer of the radio station. Who knew?
Popley was sick.
The original, the start of the dynasty, yes. Not what I was listening to. Yeah, absolutely. But Walter, you're absolutely right. I think what we've lost sight of is just the fun of conversation. That's what it's about.
So what I do on my show, which I have to promote, I don't consult anymore. I haven't consulted in 5 years. And 5 years ago, the head of programming at CBS Radio said, "Do you ever think of doing a talk show?" And then I told him that I had. Well, you're going to do one on WPHT. That's what you're going to do. All right. And WPHT is a Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, very successful, very good, solid, conservative talk station. And I'm like, I think it's covered. I don't think they need me to yell at the Democrats. Therefore, we talk about other things. You like that cut. Do you have that cut, Kurt? That would be fun to play. Do you have that? Can you play that? The college parody?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have it handy, but I'll tell you what, I will link to it in our show notes. So tell our audience what you're talking about, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes.
I tried to talk about what you and I would talk about if we met for lunch at the mall. And we ordered bourbon chicken. Now, why is it that bourbon chicken only exists at the mall? If you go to a real Chinese restaurant in Chinatown, there's no bourbon chicken on the menu. Bourbon chicken is a pure confection of the mall. We would sit there, and what would we talk about? We would talk about work. We'd talk about our kids. We'd talk about trouble with some bureaucracy, the BMV or something like that. We would try to figure out why our service engine light never goes off. And I would say to you, where are you going to go on vacation this year? Now, I don't care where you're going to go on vacation. The answer tells me whether or not you have money. I find out if you have money based on where are you going on vacation. Those are the things that people actually talk about. I have never been in a conversation with anybody at the mall or at the bus stop where they said, "Did you hear who crossed the aisle yesterday in Congress?" I've never heard that conversation. So why would you put it on the air? Why the heck would you put it on the air? So those are the things that I talk about. But then, because we want to have a good time and it's not a serious show at all, I happen to despise public radio. I think it's pretentious. And I used to play radio in my bedroom when I was 15, and that's what it sounds like to me. Let me get this straight now. They don't have commercials and they don't have to get ratings. That's a hobby. And then it's funded by daddy. And they mention all the daddies who give them money so they continue to play in their room. I hate it. We each week do a parody of public radio called The Usual Edition. And the usual edition goes over the stories from the point of view of public radio. Notice that no matter where something happened in America, they always get the point of view of people in Yemen. They always want to know what people in Yemen think about our Memorial Day parades. To find out reaction to the Missouri Memorial Day parade, we went to Yemen. What? So they do that. So we parodied it. I am so lucky. The greatest voiceover talent in America, a woman named Randy Thomas. Randy Thomas is the voice of the Grammys, the Oscars, the Billboard Awards, the Kennedy Center Awards. She voices the usual edition. and then Charlie Van Dyke, the greatest male voiceover talent in America, he does the sponsorship underwriting announcements during the show. So I'm very lucky to have that kind of support. But then I discovered these geniuses at the Kansas State University station, kids who are undergrads at Kansas State University, Manhattan, Kansas. They run this radio station like nobody's business. The stuff they turn out is brilliant and funny and amazing. Last week I said to James Copeland, who's the program director, I said, make a parody of bad college radio and send it to me. That's all I said to him. Make me a parody of bad college radio, and I need it for Sunday night. Well, you heard it. It was a stunning production. It was an exact parody of it, and those are the kind of things we do. Plus, it seems that all the wacky stories we get are always out of Florida, so we have James Parker, who's our Florida editor, who does Florida stories each week. We tried to do a lot more than just having an old white man bloviating.
There is enough of that on the radio, but man, this is good stuff. We will put links to those things in the show notes that Walter just mentioned. Hey, I got one more question before we have to take our final break, Walter. Thinking about, you said listener callers are really important to you, and you so kindly said some nice things about Telos gear and putting people on the air, and yeah, we think we did a good job of making that happen. How will that change in the future? How will callers connect to content creators, talk show hosts in the future? Will they still pick up a phone? Will they still pick up their cell phone? Will they? Do some people want to use Skype? Or is there something that the industry, that technology that we're missing socially or technologically that would somehow make this better? Should a caller maybe need to download the station's app, and there's a call button on the station's app, and you're connected at higher quality with the station? You got any ideas about connecting to talk shows?
On my Facebook page, Walter M. Sterling Facebook page, there is a button that says call, and it will put you through on the air. And I think a lot of the station apps have a call button, but I think it's a very good point. We're at a murky period in time where, even though many listeners may know about that functionality on Facebook or on a radio station app, they don't use it yet. They don't quite know how that works. The worst thing that ever happened to talk stations was cell phones. Every cell phone conversation ends with hello, hello, hello. It's one of the few times that Americans have traded portability for quality. Cell phone connections continue to be horrible, and then you put them on the air and it's worse. Every guest that I have on, and I don't have many on, but I always say you have to use a landline. I won't put you on unless you have a landline. It's a critical difference, but man, it's harder every day to find people who have a landline. It's a great question. I don't know the answer. You're right. It is a challenge. A lot of hosts have done what I won't do, and they do 3-hour monologues. Well, I'm not that smart. I think it's boring as hell. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's difficult to get phone calls most of the time. And that has a lot to do with cell phones.
Mm-hmm. I hope, I'm always hopeful that cell phone technology will improve as 5G. And people, well, you know what? People like me, people like Chris, probably yourself too, Walter, you kind of have a feeling, hey, is this call going to be good, or do I need to pull to the side of the road so I can talk to mom without getting cut off? And maybe people are becoming a bit more wary of that. Obviously not everybody, because you get callers calling in who cut and they're gone. And I tend to not get that. but I tend to kind of be aware of, ooh, this doesn't look like a good place to continue a cell phone call. Let me pull over, or let me just wait till I get to my destination and I'll be, in somebody's house or at a business, and I'll be still. But it's a good question to ask.
We have one of those problems on my show, Sterling on Sunday on Westwood One. When we have one of those problems, we have the music monkey. The music monkey starts to scream if they don't like the voice of the caller, which is often has to do with technical issues. And the only way the music monkey is calmed, because we got it from P.T. Barnum's circus when they closed, they had over 200 animals that had to be adopted out. We got the music monkey from the circus. The only way to calm the monkey is by playing the music cassette that came with the monkey. And there are only 2 songs on the cassette. It's Bop by Hanson and Happy by a group called Blades of Grass from 1967 that peaked at number 39 on the Billboard charts. Those are the only 2 songs that calm the monkey. That's how I deal with technical problems, rather than saying, oh, we're having trouble hearing you. Why don't you call back? I don't want you to call back. We're just going to have to listen to the monkey.
I love it. I got to hear that. Hey, are you looking for more affiliates? Or are you happy with the 650 kilowatters you got?
You're sitting there in Nashville. You better go to WLAC tonight. Take that program director to Ruby Tuesdays tonight and say, why are you airing yet another hour of Bill Cunningham, an old white man screaming at Democrats? Here's something different and live. Put this on. Of course, we're always looking for more affiliates, but I have to tell you this. We've been on 1 year. We have over 80 affiliates, 650 clears, WMAL-FM. It's all live clearances. We just picked up KMJ in Fresno, a 50, KFBK in Sacramento, and I'm going to be live on KFBK tonight, filling in from 7 to 10 Pacific time. So I'm going to be on KFBK tonight and tomorrow night live. Yes, we're always looking for affiliates, but I have to tell you, Westwood has done an incredible job of clearing the show. I couldn't be happier with the affiliate relations efforts made by them. And I did affiliate relations for 5 years at ABC. I was the VP GM of the ABC radio networks. There's nothing harder to do than to clear a show. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. It is the toughest sell. Those sales weasels, they're selling cost per points, cost per thousands. How hard can it be for a salesman to sell a product to someone whose job title is buyer? How hard can this be? Meanwhile, good luck selling a show to someone whose job title is programmer.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, we have got to take our last quick break, and in fact, I'm going to be busy during this break yapping, so we'll do that. And we're going to, when we come back, we're going to finish up with a tip. I'm afraid I didn't warn Walter about this, but Tobin always has a tip of the week for us, and I'll just bet you Walter has a tip as well to help either us in engineering or programmers, or maybe just us as listeners. A tip of the week from the great Walter Sabo. So that's coming up in just a minute. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, is brought to you in part by my friends at the Broadcasters General Store. And this week we're talking about one of the products that they represent. It is the Broadcast Tools ProMix 4. Well, what's the ProMix 4? It's a full-featured audio mixing console, perfect for most any broadcast studio, but it also excels in remote broadcast and in podcasting applications. It features 3 mic or line inputs. It can be either one. It's got those neat plugs that are either an XLR or a 1/4-inch tip ring sleeve. As well, it has a dedicated line input that can be switched between a balanced line input or the internal USB codec. So it gives you a program limiter. So not everybody's careful with their levels. This won't let you blast them over. A balanced and unbalanced mix bus and a mix minus output. But it also offers 3 independent headphone amps with IFB program pan controls and a comprehensive studio monitoring system. So more features, 1 mono balanced line level input. It's got mix minus output for your telephone or your codec. It's got LED output level VU meter, full duplex talkback capability, IFB audio input with level adjustment. It's got an on-air tally warning light relay output, remote channel control and status via terminal block connectors, and it can drive multiple AHR1 Plus headphone system. So lots of features, and you know what? This is perfect if you're a podcaster. Gather your friends around, put a mic in front of them, put your headphones on, have something to say, and Talk about your day, as Walter says. Don't talk politics. Good gosh, there's enough of that. Talk about your day. Let the doorbell ring and go answer it if you need to. Your friends will take over for you while you're talking. It's the Broadcast Tools Pro Mix 4, and you can get to it by going to broadcasttools.com and look for Pro Mix 4. This is just a great little solution. I think you're going to like it. And if you want to buy one, well, and even if you just want to talk, my friends at Broadcasters General Store will be happy to do that with you as well. Broadcasters General Store, the sponsor of this part of This Week in Radio Tech. I've known these folks for years. Oh, my goodness. I was buying from them in the early 90s, building radio stations for Sam Phillips in Memphis, Tennessee. And, boy, we just got great service. They would send stuff out so fast, got great prices. I remember Sam Phillips would occasionally say, now you tell him to put a little sharper pencil on that. I'll tell you what, we got great deals from Broadcasters General Store. You can call them, of course, at 352-622-7700. That number's on the website. You can go to the website, though, at bgs.cc. BGS for Broadcasters General Store, bgs.cc, Ocala, Florida. Thanks a lot, BGS and Broadcast Tools, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, it's time to wrap up the show. We're going to wrap it up with a couple of tips. Chris, Tobin, I'm going to hit you up first, my friend, with the I'm the only person that doesn't have a Christmas tree in the set. I'm going to have to fix that next week. Go ahead, Chris.
Humbug. Well, since we're talking outside broadcast events and generating revenue and engineers trying to contribute to the bottom line in a positive way, something I've been using and I've been playing with for the last 3 episodes, which is an iPad on a tripod and a microphone plugged into it. And what you're watching right now is what I'm doing. And I'm using this here. Let's go this way. The green and black item is called a Q-Mic from Digigram and basically plugs into a smartphone or an iPad, as I have right now, and terminates with an XLR connector. So you can, here we go, do that. And then you can plug your microphone in. What I've done is purchased a small little adapter that goes from the, mini plug, if you will, to 1/4 inch. So it makes it convenient for my headphones to plug in. The other nice feature with this is it's got gain control and a line input. So you can actually put sound effects if you'd like. Let me do it this way. So it's called the Q-Mic. This is the early version. It's actually one of the first generation ones. I was working with the folks at Digigram some time ago, and it was a very nice product and gift. And now the new one, I think, is blue, and it's got more improvements. But basically, as you can see, I have my smartphone hanging from it. It's a real simple setup. And I'll tell you, you need to do broadcast and do something and talk about the day's events and be at the diner and talk about what's going on with the latest hash browns or the corned beef hash. You can just set up iPad on the table, connect back to your place using the QGoLive from Harris Media, and you're off to the races. You're making money. Well, if you're not making money, then you obviously don't understand the concept of broadcasting and business. So that's how you go. And remember, broadcasting came from agriculture. It's not actually a term that's it's a broadcaster machine, and it's used to sow seeds out to the fields. So if you understand that, then you understand why you need to understand how to do better those outside events with a simple approach. Take a simple approach and you get a better chance of making money. So engineers and techs out there, those of you who have been around long enough know what I'm talking about, but those of you coming up and trying to understand, talk to the programmers, sit in a meeting and say, hey, explain to me why you need to do it this way. What is the point of the disc jockey doing X? And once you understand that, you'll be surprised how much of a friend you've made, and the chances of keeping your job are even greater. And I know Walter knows that because he's worked with some people I know. Lee Harris is one of them.
Lee Harris is I have a website called waltermsterling.com that Lee Harris actually designed and maintains, and he updates my archives, and I have no idea why. We're not like buddies. I have no idea why. One day after many years, I said to Lee Harris, why are you, the most listened to voice in New York City, doing my website? Why are you doing that for my show? And this is all he said. He said, well, it's a good show. That was and
that's exactly what I would expect.
But that's him, right?
Yeah, that is him. He's
a good show.
You, as dry as it comes, but I worked with him on several projects and definitely gets it, understands it, and passes on to others. But yeah, no. But this little package I've got here works very well. I've been using it a lot, and I'm using it right now on this microphone and into an iPad on a tripod on top of a Rhodes stage piano. So I'm having a good time.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. Walter, you got a closing tip for our listeners?
Everybody should do a podcast the way you do this. It's professional. It was well organized. I had plenty of notice. Everything worked. You look fantastic. You're in an incredible studio. What a great camera you have. You should share the information about the tech specs of how you do your podcast on your website, because it's spectacular and it's a real honor and a privilege for me to be on it. I really am very grateful that you asked me to be here today. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for the compliment. That is very kind of you. And I learned a lot of this from, you may have heard of the guy, Leo Laporte. He's on a competing national network, I think Premiere, with the Tech Guy show. So I learned from him. And I also learned from our producer, Suncast, and his friend, Andrew Zarian. So lots of people living lots of contribution into making this happen. So, but thank you so much, Walter. That's great. And yeah, it's a great idea. I should take some pictures and make a list and tell people what, on our website, and tell people what's here.
Yeah, or you should charge for that.
Well, yeah, that'd be good too. I want to thank Walter Sabo, our guest here. He does a show on the Westwood One radio network, heard all across the country on 80 radio stations. And your show is called?
Sterling on Sunday. I use a different last name so I can say terrible things about my relatives who may or may not exist.
I was going to ask why, but I figured you had your reasons. It makes it harder for the sheriff to find you. That's what I say. That's right. Walter, thank you. Chris, Tobin, thank you for being here as well. Appreciate you getting clear of your commitment there and joining us from the studio. That's great.
Yeah, no problem. No, we wrapped up today. We start again tomorrow with Ray Angry. We'll come in with a 6-piece trumpets and piano, and it's going to go crazy. It's going to be fun. We're doing fundraising here at the public radio station. For those of you who may enjoy it, and those of you who don't, that's okay. And I understand exactly what Walter's talking about, and I can appreciate that.
I know you
Not
do.
your station. I know
Trust
about
me.
your station. Yours is different. On one final thought, I saw all these commercials during your podcast, which I appreciated, and I thought they were also incredibly well done. The smartest things each one of those manufacturers can do is send me a sample. Send me a sample of that Lowo board or whatever that was. Send me a sample. I will use them on my show, and I will say on the air what equipment I'm using, because I'm asked all the time. But guys, let's step it up and start sending me new equipment. Thank you.
That's a good idea. We'll make sure that everybody hears that part. Hey, folks,
Well,
I want to
back
thank...
in the day,
Yeah.
Don't forget, back in the day, manufacturers used to do that. If you, Sony and Ampex and Panasonic, Sony comes out with a new camera. When I worked at a TV network, they're like, we got this new camera. We're not sure if it's going to work right or not, but if you're willing to try it out, we won't hold you to it. And they're like, okay, those days are gone, and that's a problem. I remember cart machines were that way, and consoles. Yeah, that's the feedback you want.
I'm going to see if I can get George Dickel to sponsor the show. Maybe Jack Daniels too. I got to express a big thanks to Suncast, our producer's done a bang-up job as usual. Thank you for making us look good and getting everybody connected, Suncast. Also, big thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. And thanks to you, our listeners and viewers. Man, I appreciate you being here. What we got to consider maybe, figuring out a way to take calls on this show. We've been talking about that for 9 years. Maybe we got to get around to it. All right, we got to go. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.